Imagine you're standing in a forest 60,000 years ago. No cities, no weapons made of metal, no armies, just a small band of people around a fire, maybe 30 of them, sharing meat from a kill. Now imagine that by tomorrow morning, half of them are dead. Not from a lion, not from starvation, from each other. Here's the question that should keep you up tonight. War has killed more human beings than almost anything else in our species' history. But we weren't born with it. No baby has ever come out of the womb wanting to kill a stranger over a hill. So somewhere, at some point, war had to be invented. And the truth about how that happened is stranger and closer to home than you think. Let's start with the easy answer, the one you probably already believe. Humans are naturally violent. We're just animals with better weapons. Case closed, right? Except that answer falls apart the second you look closely. Because if humans were simply naturally violent, you'd expect war everywhere, all the time, for our entire existence. But that's not what the evidence shows. And that gap between what we assume and what actually happened is where this story really begins. For decades, scientists pointed to chimpanzees to prove humans are hardwired for war. Chimp troops really do raid neighboring groups. They really do kill. Researchers in the 1970s watched a chimp community called the Casakila systematically wipe out a rival group over 4 years, one ambush at a time. It looked disturbingly organized, disturbingly human. So the logic seemed simple. Chimps do it. We're closely related to chimps. Therefore, war is just baked into our DNA, a leftover instinct from our animal past. Here's the problem. We share just as much ancestry with another ape, the bonobo, and bonobos almost never kill each other. When bonobo groups meet, instead of raiding, they often do something remarkable. They mingle, they groom each other. Sometimes they even mate across group lines. Same family tree, completely different outcome, which means violence isn't something locked into our biology like eye color. It's a possibility. A door that can open or stay closed depending on the conditions around it. So the real question isn't, are humans violent? It's, what conditions swing that door open? To answer that, we have to go back further than most people expect. Back to when humans were still hunter-gatherers, moving in small bands, following herds and seasons. And here's the twist almost nobody tells you. For roughly 95% of human existence, there is barely any archaeological evidence of organized warfare. Not peace in some fairy tale sense. There were fights, there were killings, there was jealousy and revenge. But mass, organized, group versus group combat, the kind we'd recognize as war, is almost invisible in the deep past. Picture a hunter-gatherer band of 25 people. They move every few weeks. They own almost nothing they can't carry. If a fight breaks out with a neighboring group, there's an obvious solution available to almost everyone involved. Walk away. No fixed home to defend. No stockpiled grain to protect. No fences. No property lines. Nothing worth dying for that you couldn't just leave behind and rebuild somewhere else. Now here's where the story turns. Something changed. Something made walking away no longer an option. And once that happened, war stopped being rare. It became almost unavoidable. That something was farming. Around 12,000 years ago, in places like the Fertile Crescent, humans started doing something no species had really done before at scale, staying put, planting seeds and waiting months for them to grow, building houses that took real effort to construct, storing grain in pits that could feed a family through winter. Picture it. You've spent an entire season clearing land, planting, watering, weeding. Your grain store is the difference between your children eating in February or starving. Now picture a stranger walking toward that grain store with empty hands and hungry eyes. Suddenly, walking away isn't a solution anymore. Walking away means losing everything you built. For the first time in human history, there was something fixed, valuable, and impossible to simply relocate. And anything valuable that can be taken, eventually, someone will try to take it. This is the deeper truth hiding underneath the myth of natural human violence. War didn't come from some ancient bloodlust buried in our genes. War came from ownership. From the moment humans started accumulating things worth defending, defending became worth killing for. But surviving one raid isn't enough to explain full-blown organized warfare with leaders, tactics, and armies. Defending a single grain pit is one thing. Coordinating dozens of people to fight, follow orders, and risk death together, that requires something else entirely. So what turned scattered violence into organized war? The answer is almost uncomfortable in how ordinary it sounds. Politics. Once humans settled down, populations exploded, villages became towns. Strangers who'd never met still had to somehow trust each other, share resources, agree on rules. And out of that pressure, something new emerged: leadership. Chiefs. Elders with authority, small hierarchies that could organize not just farming and trade, but also defense. Here's the part that reframes everything. The same organizational tools that let humans build irrigation systems, coordinate harvests, and construct the first cities, that exact same social technology, cooperation, hierarchy, division of labor, could be redirected toward violence. The skill that let 100 people dig a canal together is the same skill that lets 100 people march into battle together. War, in other words, isn't the opposite of civilization. It's a byproduct of it. The very abilities that make humans the most cooperative species on Earth, our capacity to organize, to trust strangers, to work as one coordinated unit toward a shared goal, are the same abilities that made large-scale war possible in the first place. Think about that for a second. A wolf pack can hunt together, but a wolf pack can't build an army, can't plan a siege, can't pass down a grudge for 3 generations through stories told around a fire. Only a species capable of deep, symbolic cooperation could ever invent something as complex and terrible as organized war. Which brings us to the archaeological site that makes this whole theory click into place, a place called Nataruk in modern-day Kenya, roughly 10,000 years old. There, scientists found the remains of at least 27 people, men, women, even a pregnant woman, showing signs of violent death, some with hands apparently bound. No farming yet at this site, but signs of a settled, resource-rich environment near a lake. Something worth staying for, something worth fighting over. It's one of the earliest snapshots we have of exactly the moment this story describes. Humans who had started to settle, started to accumulate, and started to organize violence around what they now had to lose. So let's zoom back out. War wasn't handed to us by evolution like a genetic curse. It wasn't inevitable from the moment the first humans stood upright. It emerged the moment we started building lives too valuable to walk away from, and it scaled the moment we learned to organize ourselves well enough to protect or seize what we'd built. Which means the uncomfortable truth isn't that humans are broken, or naturally evil, or doomed to violence. The truth is almost the opposite, and somehow it's even more unsettling. We didn't invent war because we're uniquely savage. We invented war because we're uniquely capable of working together. The same trust, loyalty, and coordination that let a stranger become a neighbor, that let 100 people build a city, a temple, a civilization, is the very thing that let 100 people become an army. War isn't the animal in us breaking free. War is what happens when the most cooperative species on the planet finally has something worth losing. And that changes the question you should really be asking. Not, why are humans violent? But, what have we decided, generation after generation, is worth fighting for, and whether that answer has to stay the same?